Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third and last webinar of the JoinHealth 2025 Spring Series. This webinar is dedicated to the biotech and health tech Asian market and is co-hosted by Health Cluster Portugal and EIT Health InnoStars. I am Juliana Alves from the Health Cluster Portugal, and moderating this session with me is Carolina Diniz from the EIT Health. For those who don't know, these webinars, the Join Health webinars, are being organized within the DigiHealth PT, the Portuguese digital innovation hub dedicated to the health sector. And I would like to invite you all to visit our website or get in touch with us to explore how this initiative may support the development and market access of your digital health technologies. And now moving to the central part of today's webinar, it is my pleasure to introduce you our speakers, Christopher Lay from the Hong Kong Trade Development Council and Laurent Couleur from HK DTech. Christopher is the director for France, Spain, and Portugal at the Hong Kong Trade Development Center, where he leads initiatives to support bilateral trade relations across Southern Europe. With over 2 decades of experience in international trade promotion, Christopher has led senior positions across Asia and Europe, including Director for Korea and Head of the IP and Technology Unit at Hong Kong Trade Development Council. Laurent is the Chief Business Officer at HKD Tech, a spin-off of Hong Kong Baptist University, focusing on in vitro diagnostic and life science. With a master in international trade management, Laurent brings extensive experience in business development across Asian markets and is also the co-founder of several ventures in the region. So we will begin this session with Christopher, who will share insights into healthcare and biotech opportunities in the Asia-Pacific region, highlighting Hong Kong's strategic role as a gateway to China and the Greater Bay Area. He will also address key market entry strategies, regulatory considerations, and how the Hong Kong Trade Development Council supports international companies looking to enter the region. And following Christopher's presentation, we will hear from Laura, who will share a concrete example of a company that has successfully entered and grown in the Asian market. And after both presentations, we will have a Q&A session moderated by Carolina Diniz. And before I hand it over to Christopher, I would like to thank to the audience for attending and leave a couple of quick notes. I want to inform that the presentations will be available to those who request them by filling the survey we will share after the webinar. And that the recording of this webinar will be available on the Health Cluster YouTube channel. And of course, please feel free to share your questions and comments using the Q&A tool throughout the sessions. Let's now move to our first presentation. Christopher, you can share your presentation and start whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Juliana. And hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. Juliana already explained who I am.
We are, Christopher.
Sorry, hi.
We are listening you very low.
Oh, sorry, I forgot. Is it better now? I'm sorry, let me start over. So, hello everyone. I'm very happy to be here. And thank you, Juliana, for that wonderful introduction. So let's get straight into it. Just 1 second. Let me work on this. Of course, as a representative of the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, I'm here to talk about Hong Kong. But before we do that, and as Juliana alluded to earlier, let's talk a little bit about the market opportunity, specifically in Asia Pacific, and indeed the whole world. This slide right here, you can see um, the sort of the data set is mainly to do with the biotech market. It's got a 2022 dollar value of the APEC biotech market, which was 291 billion US dollars, and the projected value for 2030, which is 815 billion US dollars. So that is more than a twofold increase, and that is, of course, represents a very significant and an exponential increase. And we have to put that increase into several contexts. One, um, pretty much the whole world, including Europe and Asia and North America as well, is undergoing an aging population issue. That, of course, brings up a whole lot of other issues such as labor shortage or labor transition, productivity, etc. But the aging population issue, of course, brings up a huge demand for or increasing demand for quality services, quality products, and increasingly these products need to be relevant not just in one region but relevant to the global market because a lot of these areas with the most severe sort of aging population issues such as Korea or China, Japan, etc., they would demand a lot more services and products or drugs and medical devices, etc. So this illustrates that we do foresee the trend of an increasing demand for these type of services or the increasing market in general to continue. And then when you couple the fact with that some of the other countries in the Asia region, for example, India or other parts of Southeast Asia, where the aging issue is not as severe and where the population, in fact, is still growing. And as they continue to come out of the pandemic, as they continue to recover and record positive growth, they too, the population will, of course, the wealth will increase, the increasing middle class, for example. So they too will start to demand more products and services in healthcare, more quality, and increasingly they will demand more products and services that are catered to their specific demands. So whether it's when it comes to say pharmaceuticals or biotechnology where they bring into, say, Asian DNA into the consideration or the clinical trials, or even products and services that are more specific to the problems or wellness issue that these countries experience. Overall, there will be an increasing demand, whether it's in pharmaceuticals, in medtech, in medical devices, drugs, etc., etc. And again, we foresee this to continue on. In fact, healthcare is perhaps one area. Healthcare is a very broad umbrella, of course, but it's perhaps one area where it's least likely to be affected by the fluctuations, or at least from a long-term perspective, the growth is quite positive. Um, this is particularly relevant today or in this recent days or weeks, of course, to do with the US tariffs or the latest withdrawal of the tariffs. But, this is a very unstable market or rather there's a lot of fluctuations happening, and this is perhaps the best time for Portugal and Asia and indeed for Europe in general and Asia to work closer together, not just in terms of doing business with each other, but also in terms of the exchange of knowledge, the exchange of ideas, the collaboration in technology, for example, so as to, of course, mitigate the risk that further fluctuation would pose. But also, I think in the long term, both regions need to sort of scale back a little bit their traditional sort of reliance or traditional prerogative given to the US market. I think diversity or risk management is very important. So a closer relationship between Asia and Europe would be beneficial to all. And of course, from our perspective, Hong Kong is right in the middle of that. Hong Kong is also in the middle of two vastly growing sort of trade regions or economic zones, however you want to put it. So firstly is the Greater Bay Area, or the full name is the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area. This is an area in southern China, including Hong Kong, Macau, and 9 cities across Guangdong province, including, of course, Shenzhen and Guangzhou. This area is is a very unique area because although we call it a sort of a special economic zone, and those 9 cities are quite geographically close to each other. There is still three sets of borders, three sets of regulations, three different currencies, for example. So we're not sort of creating a new um, area so much as just bringing existing economic infrastructure closer together, bring the existing excellence or expertise of each city closer together so they can work as an organic whole. So this region currently we estimate there to be around 86 million people. The 2023, I think, or 22, the GDP is 2 trillion US dollars just for this 11 cities. That is equivalent to the GDP of Italy. And in fact, OECD estimated that by 2030, that GDP will increase to 4 trillion US dollars, so equivalent to the GDP of, say, Germany today. So what you can see, of course, is an area with a very affluent population and with a projected continued growth in, development in economic growth and in wealth, etc. So, and of course, that relates to their continued increasing demand in products and services, including healthcare. And just to add to that, Hong Kong, apart from being a part of the Greater Bay Area, Hong Kong also has what we call CEPA, CEPA, which stands for the Closer Economic Partnership Agreement with China. It is essentially the most advantageous free trade agreement anyone can have with China, because I won't go through it right now. It covers a host of sectors, both products and services. There's also investment protection, etc. But the key clause in that agreement is that if China enters into a new agreement with another economy, which has a better clause than what Hong Kong has, China must offer that same clause to Hong Kong as well. So it is guaranteed that Hong Kong will always have the best free trade agreement with China. So this facilitates not just, accessing the opportunities within the Greater Bay Area, but also the entire Chinese market. The other thing I want to quickly talk about is the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. This is the world's largest free trade agreement. It comprises more than half the world's population. China is part of this free trade agreement. Hong Kong is not yet part of it because it's not a country on its own, so it needed to apply for it once it's been set up, but the application is already in process. But even now, Hong Kong has uh, very long-standing trade, logistics, and investment connections with most of the countries of this free trade agreement. So if you want to take advantage of some, the opportunities in these countries, say, in North Asia or Southeast Asia, South Asia through to the Middle East, etc., definitely Hong Kong can be a platform for you to do that. Now, Hong Kong, it's perhaps not best known for being a healthcare hub, but actually, maybe that's partly our fault. Hong Kong has not done a lot in promoting its excellence in terms of being a business innovation and fundraising hub for healthcare. But there are a lot of reasons why, we would encourage you to think about Hong Kong or consider Hong Kong as part of your internationalization strategy. First and foremost, Hong Kong had long-standing and very strong economic fundamentals. I would assume you guys are already familiar with some of these. I won't go through them one by one, but suffice to say, whether it's from a financial perspective, from a logistics perspective in terms of connectivity, and both in terms of air cargo and sea cargo, and whether from a legal perspective, particularly in terms of our use of the common law and as well as our intellectual property protection. Also, of course, in terms of tax, we have a simple and business-friendly tax system. Basically, there's a lot of reasons why Hong Kong itself, as an economy, as a market, all the fundamentals are there for healthcare companies or startups to take advantage of. And in terms of going specifically into healthcare and biotech, the ecosystem there, Hong Kong fulfills several roles. One of them was, of course, acting as a bridge between mainland China and overseas. And that is not just in terms of import and export, that also goes to investment collaboration, that also goes to talent collaboration, and of course, knowledge transfer or the exchange of knowledge. Uh, Hong Kong, in fact, is the single biggest source of FDI for every single province in China. So the companies and investors in Hong Kong would already have very extensive networks in China. So if you are already at a stage where you are open to thinking of how you can access that massive market in China, I would greatly encourage you to work with a partner in Hong Kong instead of going to China directly. In terms of talent, we have some of the leading universities in Asia. Some of the logos are there. I suppose the names would be familiar to some of you. We also have very comprehensive support from various institutions, not just ourselves, but also organizations such as the Hong Kong Institute of Biotech, the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park, as well as the Hong Kong Cyberport, who is in fact building a AI supercomputing center. So that would further accelerate our capability in innovation and research and development. We of course have a very vibrant service sectors. I mentioned, or I discussed a little bit about that in the previous slide. I just want to mention one more thing here. If you look at the second point under the service sectors part, I've written there the interim measures arrangement. This is a very special arrangement that only Hong Kong has with mainland China. The idea is that if you enter into a transaction with a Chinese company, and if you put it in the contract that if there are any disputes, these disputes will be resolved in Hong Kong. Then, if in the unfortunate case there is some sort of disputes, your qualified arbitrator in Hong Kong can appeal to the courts in China to freeze a certain amount of assets from that Chinese company. So this acts as an extra layer of protection for international companies doing business with Chinese companies. This has proven to be very attractive to companies from not just from Hong Kong, but from around the world. We've had applicants from North America, from Japan, Korea, Southeast Asia. In fact, there are cases where two Chinese companies doing business with each other would take advantage of this particular arrangement and base their transaction in Hong Kong. This is just one other thing that if that could be potentially useful when startups or technology companies are looking to do business with China. The Hong Kong government is very supportive of healthcare initiatives or healthcare and biotech related projects. I won't go into all the details. I'm happy to share the PowerPoint afterwards. So I won't go into the all the numbers and the facts, but you can see, for example, the grants for more than 870 projects have already reached more than 1.8 billion Hong Kong dollars. It's also a very sophisticated market. And in fact, recently, the government has also announced plans for further funding that either directly into the healthcare sector or funding into so research and development capability. For example, a new institute or R&D institute in AI, for example, or more fund directed to manufacturing or robotics. These will also contribute to the whole ecosystem in terms of supporting R&D and innovation in healthcare. And if you do end up having a presence in Hong Kong, then you are also eligible to a whole suite of other types of funding schemes. These are just a sample of them. I won't go through them, but you can have a look at them later on. Hong Kong is also a fundraising hub. I mean, Hong Kong as a fundraising hub in general is quite well known, but specifically for biotech as well, is actually the second largest fundraising hub for biotech companies in the world behind the US. The reason is that in 2018, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange introduced what they call Chapter 18A, which is a new listing rule specifically for pre-revenue biotech companies to be able to take advantage of the exchange in Hong Kong. This is in recognition of both, on one hand, the increasing importance and potential of biotech as a sector, and also the fact that, because the nature of biotech companies is that they need to go through a much longer time for R&D or clinical trials, for example. So the standard requirements may not be very fair to those companies, and this is why since the establishment or the introduction of this particular rule, we've already had more than 60 companies take advantage of this, and we will welcome more companies from around the world to consider this. In terms of R&D collaboration, there's several reasons why, particularly for those companies who are still in the R&D stage or in the clinical trial stage, to think of Hong Kong as a potential platform. If you do clinical trials in Hong Kong, the results or the data is recognized, of course, in Hong Kong and in China. Is also recognized by the EU as well as by the FDA and US. So this is quite convenient for, or quite time saving for those companies. There is also something called the GBA Pharmaceuticals and Medical Devices Connect Scheme. What that means is that drugs and medical devices that have received approval in Hong Kong, um, the hospitals or public institutions, not just in Hong Kong, but across the Greater Bay Area, can source them directly, even if those drugs or devices have not cleared the requirements specifically in China. This is like a facilitation scheme where for companies with drugs and medical devices, it's sort of like a preferential access into at least the southern China markets. One more thing I want to mention here about, I should have mentioned earlier about the clinical trials. China also allows genomic data to be exported to Hong Kong specifically for clinical trials purposes. This only applies to Hong Kong and no other economies. This is particularly important nowadays when data diversity is, I would say, a requirement for new drugs or new technology. So if you were bringing over your ideas to Hong Kong for clinical trials, you can take advantage of such data, not just from the European side, but from the Chinese side as well. So this will help open up a much bigger market. And this is why a lot of international healthcare MNCs or startups or universities are already in Hong Kong doing business. You can see some of the logos there. I'm sure you recognize them. Hong Kong, there are also a lot of other institutions in Hong Kong that are supporting the whole healthcare and biotech R&D ecosystem. The Hong Kong Science and Technology Park, as you can see, they already offer various different facilities to support different segments for healthcare. The other ones include ASTRI, which is another government-funded research institute. We also have quite a number of Chinese research laboratories or science labs in Hong Kong. We have the MIT Hong Kong Innovation Node as well. They have a specific vertical on healthcare. And I just want to quickly mention the HSITP, which stands for the Hong Kong Shenzhen Innovation and Technology Park. This is a brand new technology park that's actually still under construction. The InnoLife Hub is expected to be complete by 2027. But this is a very unique technology park because it's built right at border between Hong Kong and Shenzhen. In fact, there are areas in Hong Kong and there are parts of it in Shenzhen. The idea is that you can take advantage of the whether it's the regulatory or the financing or the capital market on both sides of the border. So this, when complete, would add further impetus to R&D, to POC, etc. for healthcare and biotech. And just also here, just to show some of the other examples of international collaboration in R&D being conducted in Hong Kong. Again, I won't go through all of them in details, but as you can see, that we have universities or MNCs, pharmaceuticals, institutions. We also have ones that are more broad-based or ones that are very issue specific. We also have research center or acceleration labs, etc. And I think should also quickly talk about the startup ecosystem in Hong Kong. In fact, Hong Kong, for a city of 7 million or 7.5 million people, actually has a very vibrant startup ecosystem. At the end of 2024, we have close to 4,700 startups, which is a historic high. Um, and of- and what's also worth pointing out is that these are not just local founders or founders from the Chinese mainland. In fact, we have founders from across the world, from different regions. One of them will be speaking to you all soon, so I won't dwell on this fact. But also a quick word here. This slide here shows you sort of the breakdown in terms of sectors of those 4,700 or so startups. Of course, fintech is number one. Hong Kong is a financing center, of course. But if you add up those related to healthcare, for example, we have 275 under health and medical, and then another 235 under biotech. Those two add up is already more than 500. So as you can see, healthcare and biotech is a very significant part of our startup ecosystem, and in fact, our continued path as an economy or the strategy for economic growth. And I also want to quickly talk about the idea of Hong Kong's transition towards primary evaluation. Primary evaluation refers to the approval of drugs and medical devices based on clinical trials conducted in either in Hong Kong or in other jurisdictions. This would be a a market improvement in terms of not requiring other registration approvals. So, or rather based on strictly on clinical trials. So this is a transition that Hong Kong is undergoing at the moment. In fact, we have already started and has already received more than 260 inquiries since then, and we've got 5 new drugs already approved under this new mechanism that we call One Plus. When this One Plus mechanism is fully institutionalized into the ecosystem in Hong Kong, this would speed up the sort of approval process required for drugs and medical devices. This is, of course, quite beneficial to international companies. There are other initiatives in support to this transition towards primary evaluation. The Hong Kong Center for Medical Products Regulation will be fully operational either by next year or 2027. This new organization will take charge of the registration of drugs and medical devices utilizing the primary evaluation approach. There's also the Greater Bay Area International Clinical Trial Institute. This has already been established, and this is a one-stop platform for international companies or research institutions to provide them with support and resources for clinical trials. This is also expected to help accelerate the transition towards primary evaluation, and of course, things like cross-border clinical trials or data transfer, genomic data transfer for clinical trials. This institute will be able to make it more efficient, again, which is to the benefit to those conducting the clinical trials. So as I mentioned earlier, we will have one of our founders from Hong Kong speak to you all after me, but I would just quickly highlight two examples of European or international healthcare companies utilizing Hong Kong. First is EuroEyes. It is a Germany headquartered eye clinic. They specialize in laser surgeries. They chose Hong Kong as the sort of the headquarter in a sense for their APAC expansion, not just into China, but other countries. And in fact, they chose Hong Kong over US and UK as a listing destination in 2019 because it's not just because of proximity to the capital, but they wanted to be closer to the growth markets, and they identify China and Asia as where the future growth market will be, and that's why they listed in Hong Kong. The other one is Rainbow Genomics. This is actually a US-based precision medicine company that came to Hong Kong because of the capability as an R&D or innovation facilitator, and they are now partnering with a firm in Hong Kong to distribute their products not just to China, but in fact to the rest of Asia and even back to the US. So as you can see, even though they're going a big roundabout, they still think that it was more efficient and more effective to actually go to Hong Kong to look for a partner. So finally, a word about who we are and what we can do. So firstly, we are a non-profit organization. We are not part of the Hong Kong government, although we do work very closely with them, of course. In fact, we have 50 offices around the world, and we work with governments, public sector organizations, as well as private sector businesses and startups pretty much in every region. What we try to do is to help companies look for cross-border partnerships. Those type of partnerships could be in R&D or POC. It could be fundraising or strategic investment. It could be in customer acquisition, distribution, etc. Because we are non-profit and we are not functioning as a consultant, which means we are not taking commission or equity or fees. That allows us to be very flexible in what we try to do for companies or the types of companies we try to help. So basically, we are like a free business matching service. And so yeah, feel free to reach out to us if you have any inquiries. But here. Before I sign off, I just want to quickly point out two of the healthcare related initiatives that we do. Both of them have take place in Hong Kong each year at towards the end of May. The first is the Asia Summit on Global Health. So this is a conference. I'm sure all of you have been to conferences or many conferences in your time, so I won't go through it. But I just want to quickly highlight here is the deal making and business matching. So throughout the 2-day conference, as I mentioned, we have 50 offices around the world. So each of us would invite the local investors as well as startups and project owners to go to Hong Kong, and we would arrange one-to-one meetings throughout the 2 days. And of course, we will not place a bilateral restriction. So if you do participate, for example, we could be arranging meetings for you, not just with those from Hong Kong, but those from China or Asia, even Europe and North America. Excuse me. And this is just some of the numbers associated with last year's edition. As you can see, it's very well attended. It's a very high level event, and of course, there's a lot of meetings and connections happening at the conference. At the same time, in the same venue as the conference, we also have a trade exhibition. It's the Hong Kong International Medical and Healthcare Fair. So this, of course, is functions more as an exhibition. You can see we have a very wide variety of exhibit categories, as well as the types of buyers we bring in, whether they are from medical organizations, public hospital, private hospitals, buying offices, retailers, e-commerce, etc., etc. Of course, any exhibition would have a very strong business matching element to it. In fact, the business matching will begin online before the event and then offline at the event. And even afterwards, we will continue with the online business matching as well. So I think I will stop there first. Again, very happy to speak to you all here, and feel free to let us know if you have any questions later or contact us later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christopher, for your presentation. It was great to hear more about this highly vibrant health innovation ecosystem there in Hong Kong, and this unique role of Hong Kong in as a connector to China and also the Great Bay Area. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And to the audience, please feel free to leave your questions to Christopher using the Q&A tool, and we will address them after the Laurent presentation. And now, and without further delay, let's move on to Laurent presentation. Laurent, whenever you are ready, we can start.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, hello everyone. First of all, thank you very much, to Juliana, the whole team of Portugal Health Cluster, as well as HKTDC for the invitation and the organization. Christopher, just one thing, I really love your presentation about Hong Kong. It's a really great overview. Even me, I'm here for a very long time, but I can tell you that I learned a couple of things. So it was really great. And it
Thanks.
really points the practical aspect and how people can leverage the Hong Kong as a hub, right, as a tech hub. So I would like not to repeat some of what you said, but anyway, there's a few things that also come. The first things before starting, I would like to make two remarks. First, the conversation is primarily and mainly addressed for tech founder, okay, and for people aspiring to launch tech startup in Hong Kong or to expand their business here. So it's very, very dedicated to entrepreneur. Secondly, I'll mention, some organization that already been mentioned by Christopher, or programs that will be that will use along the conversation. So if you're afraid to miss it, as said, there will be a Q&A session. So just feel free to just chill and relax and listen, and you can ask any question later on. Okay. So let me just get started right now. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I would like, okay, first to explain, I decided to arrange this short presentation, even I have a lot to tell you, to be honest. I don't know if 15 minutes will be enough. It's about three aspects. First is about what we're doing on our history. So that's give you a bit of background. Then, the link of, with Hong Kong that we have in Hong Kong as a tech hub. And finally, I'll give you tips and advice, for people willing to set up in Hong Kong, okay? So let me just then get started. Everyone can see my screen, right? Is it all right? Juliana, can you see the screen, right? Yeah.
Yes, we can see the screen, Lauren. The sound is not very good. Could you please stay closer to the microphone?
Okay, but okay, I'm trying not
Yeah.
to move far from it. So let me maybe
Now
increase
it's
the
perfect.
volume. Is it all right?
Yes,
Okay.
much better.
So yeah. So as I said, let's start with our company and our story. Okay. So basically, Hong Kong GTech is a biotech startup, as you all understood. We are specialized in developing and manufacturing fluorescent nanoparticles to improve the detection of biomarker in the field of research and medical diagnosis, okay? So thanks to a very high detection sensitivity, our patented technology allowed the early detection of a wide range of biomarker and can be also applied outside the medical field, like in environmental application, also food safety, and even in energy sector, okay? So to give you a bit the background to understand how we came to be, it's important to notice that the technology was starting, if I remember well, in 2012 by the Professor Loïc Charbonnier, a director at the CNRS of Strasbourg in France, and was continued then from 2016 by Johan Goetz, co-founder and CEO, who studied in Hong Kong for nearly 3 years at the Hong Kong Baptist University. I remember because this is really a key, stakeholder in our journey. So part of his double PhD, and where he met Chan Sifai, a fellow PhD student who then became our co-founder and CTO later on. So also being myself from Strasbourg, I quickly had the chance to meet Johan and we became friends. So then at the end of 17, he had to move back to France to present his PhD thesis. And he, in the same time, launched quickly after Polyditech, which is our sister company located in France, thanks to the support of the French government. But being also graduated from the Hong Kong Baptist University, Johan could also leverage the support of the Hong Kong government and launch HKDTech, on 2019 to be precise. We incorporate on the 25th of September 2019, where he embarked Phi and I on this journey. So quickly about the milestones to give you a bit how things has been played for us. We incorporated in 19. In 20, you all know that COVID kicked in, right? So the government was actually more, fighting the pandemic rather than being focused on developing the policy and support startup, on the innovation level. So we had then to, let's say, to start and to survive, we started to sell rapid tests, in Europe for the first year. And in 2021, the first major milestones was the grant of the European patent that we got on the 13th of January 2021. And subsequently, we get accepted into the TSSSU, a funding program which stands for Technology Startup Support Scheme for University through the Hong Kong Baptist University, okay? So that was in 2021. 2022, we joined the incubation program of the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park that Christopher talked about. And we also launched our first detection kit. 2023, we could sign the first distribution agreement for Hong Kong, but also one for China. 2024, another one with Thailand and with Japan. And in 2025, so we launched a fundraising campaign to grow and scale the business. So now that you know our story and relationship with Hong Kong, let's talk about Hong Kong as a tech hub, okay? Because that's, oh, sorry, I forgot to move on the slide. So that's just a slide about what we're doing. So it's fluorescent nanoparticles, as you can see. So Hong Kong is the tech hub. That's really the heart of the conversation. You may recognize some of the logo that was already introduced by Christopher previously. But I would like to really complement, from our perspective. So I will emphasize several aspects about Hong Kong and mostly the strengths and advantage for tech founder specifically, okay? So let me check. Okay, we are good. The business environment, without entering into details, Hong Kong is really a prime business environment for many reasons, like strategic location, pro-business policy, low tax rate, simple regulatory framework, also trilingual workforce and cultural diversity. So this is really the foundation as Hong Kong as a hub. And what about on the technology ecosystem, technological level? Hong Kong has recently only turned into a tech hub, I would say, since early 2000, and mainly with the creation of the Science Park, which dated back at 2001, but we went quickly from basically 0 to 12 unicorn. So this is really not bad if you consider that we are a territory of only 7.5 million people, right? So Hong Kong has also strong intellectual property protection and has an extensive policy that fosters innovation and growth, okay? And all of this being possible thanks to the effort of the Hong Kong government, which is really eager to set Hong Kong as a prime tech hub globally. And which brings me to the next consideration, which is about the Hong Kong government, okay, and this support, which has been key in our developments. So the government has been really proactive in the development of the tech ecosystem and very aggressive to catch up on innovation, especially since early 2000, as I mentioned, and especially compared with Singapore, which started earlier and which was for a long time seen as the main tech hub in Asia. So Hong Kong has successfully launched several parks, like the Science Park, HSTP, Cyberport, to foster like tech startup, and the third one, the HSITP, Hong Kong Shenzhen Innovation Technology Park, is under construction to be able to welcome more projects and startup with a more regional focus covering the Greater Bay Area. So those parks offer several programs like pre-incubation, incubation, acceleration, with some of the most generous grants you can find in the world, like ESS, that was also on the presentation of Christopher, which is the Enterprise Support Scheme, which is a one-to-one matching funding up to 10 million Hong Kong dollar, and so which is 1.33 million US dollar, and the latest Raise Plus, that is a 5-year non-dilutive funding of 20 million Hong Kong dollar per year, which is about 2.66 million USD per year, and so for a total of 13.33 million US dollar for the entire period of 5 years. Okay, pretty hard to get, but imagine this is like, it's probably never been seen in the world. So that really needs to be emphasized, especially for tech founders. We're running like capital intensive, business like, biotech, for example, or deep tech, So Hong Kong is also well-renowned university that deliver world-class program and with high ranking, and also being part of the ecosystem, and specifically on the grant system, like the famous TSSSU funding program that I talked previously about, and that is a non-dilutive grant up to 1.5 million Hong Kong dollar per year for a period of 3 years. So which is roughly 200,000 US per year, that you can get over, for a period of 3 years, which brings a total of 600,000, right? And this is also non-dilutive. So that's also a very great way to kickstart a journey. Finally, Hong Kong being a financial center is a highly developed capital market, extensive financial services, as with many funds of various kinds and size, which makes it a perfect place for startups in terms of funding opportunity, okay? Because that's key, especially in deep tech. Again, if there's no capital around, it's very hard to make it beyond the early stage. So finally, and let me see if I'm in, yeah, I have a couple of minutes left, right? Because that's the probably the most important for people interested in Hong Kong. I would like to finish with some tips and advice for people interested in setting up in Hong Kong, or expand their business, taken from my personal journey and experience. So we'll cover here, let me show you, okay, access to tech programs and grants, but also the choice and management of those programs and grants. So let me start, access to the grant program. I could say that it couldn't be easier. Since you don't need to be a Hong Kong citizen or resident, you don't need to hire a local director like it's the case in Singapore. You don't even need to come to Hong Kong. You just need to incorporate your company in Hong Kong, which is easy, fast, and relatively low cost. But often in certain part of the operation, representing usually like 50% of the people involved in the project, they must be located in Hong Kong, but which makes sense, right? You still need to have operation in Hong Kong. But you can also leverage university grant without being a student from a Hong Kong university. In the case you hire like a co-founder or people in your team from local university, like graduated from local university. You can access those grants, especially the tissue funding that I talked earlier, which is probably the best way to kickstart a venture. Finally, if you don't have any tech or patent, but you still have an expertise in a specific field, you can contact local university and discuss the licensing of their IP. Because Hong Kong university have registered thousands of patents covering a wide field of industry and application, and they are very happy when anyone comes with a project that can lead to the commercial industrialization and commercialization of their patent. Okay, that's something really to leverage also, that people tend to forget. Then, regarding the choice of tech programming grants, my main advice would be here, don't rush for any program or grant, even if they look easy or appealing. to you for whatever reason. And the first rules is to really make a clear objective and budget before checking available grants. Because if, for example, you can get a pre-incubation funding of 100K, but that that your proof of concept will cost you 2 or 3 times more. Don't apply thinking that money is money and always good to be taken. Because, for example, a pre-incubation, it's Science Park is a 12 months commitment, which is quite a lot of time. And especially when you need more money than just 100K, you rather consider applying for any other program like the incubation program directly, which conditions are stricter, but it does not mean that you cannot succeed in applying for the incubation, okay? So let's now finish management of those programs and grants. So beside the principle of non-double funding, which means that you cannot get more than one grant to cover the same item, you can always accumulate several grants together, which is great financially, but that can be highly time consuming in terms of administrative tasks, accounting and reporting, okay? You can obviously hire service providers, applying on your behalf, but for reporting and administrative tasks, it will be handled by yourself. So you may consider hiring someone in your team, even part-time, right, for this kind of matters, and that person could also help you on other tasks like marketing, office management, HR, any other support function. But you definitely don't want to spend days of work every year as well as energy on those kind of tasks, while your main focus must be to develop your product and look for potential user and investor if needed. So yeah, I guess I'm on time, which is great. I wanted to tell more, but anyway, we still have the Q&A questions. So thank you everyone for your listening. I hope it was clear and insightful. I'm happy to answer all the questions you might have. And for anyone interested in connecting with me, feel free just to use the link, the QR code, for my LinkedIn on this slide. Okay, so thank you very much and looking forward for the Q&A session.
Thank you so much, Laurent. Carolina, the floor is now open for question. I don't know if, Carolina, if we have already questions in the Q&A tool.
Yes, we do have one question that is for Laurent. So what were the biggest unexpected challenges you faced when entering the Asian market, and how did you overcome them?
Okay. It's a general question because there's first a lot of obstacle. We meet a lot of different challenges, but I think one of the main one, it's in terms of especially in our specific field, it's how the market is organized. That's something that is very different than what's going on in Europe, and we have also an entity in Europe. So mainly it's how the product is structured. Who are the player and how does it work, right? And the main things that we realize is that in Europe you mostly work directly with user, right, with the direct user. Even though we're B2B, right? It's working with manufacturer. While in Asia you basically mostly work through local distributors. So this is something that it's the best, at least to kickstart. You have to go through this because that's culturally how it works. And if you look at, there is also a few reasons behind. First, the diversity of language, which can be very complex and different culture, and also all the the business relationship, which is much more personal, right, in Asia compared to what you have in Europe, which is probably a bit more straightforward. And so it's really hard to bridge that gap. So the distributors, your partners, to open the market for you. So this is probably one of the working directly with user at the first stage. It's very, very difficult, and moreover, you don't have your name is not known, people don't trust you. So you have a lot of disadvantage. And so the distributor is the main key to kickstart, right? That's what I want to answer to this question.
Thank you. Laura, if I may, I also have a question myself. Are there specific government incentives or funding schemes currently available for foreign companies setting up R&D in Hong Kong?
So I heard that this is for really early stage. I mean, there's a soft landing program, which is launched by Hong Kong Science and Technology Park. So it's a 12 months program, and you get a support. So you get access to the ecosystem. You get, you can be part of events. You get also some days of funding, which is probably up to 100,000 Hong Kong dollar, which is about 13,000 US dollar, right? And this is a very new program, but then you can again go to find Science Park because they have a different program. They have the pre-incubation and incubation, which are really the foundation for any startup to kickstart their journey. And this is accessible to anyone just coming to Hong Kong, and as long as you register a company, that's probably the easiest way to start. Because I mentioned the university grant or program, but this is you need to be affiliated, associated to a university, which is, if you come alone or alone with your team from overseas, the best way is to find, a science park. I mean, talking about deep tech, and if you are more into IT, you have to go to small cyberport, right? That's or hardware, everything which is more on tangible tech. It's science park. So this is it's really the I would say the easy one-stop solution and the best way to get into Hong Kong. Yeah.
Thank you. We have another question on the Q&A.
Maybe Christopher wanted to add something because he probably know a lot more.
Sorry, I won't go through all the details, but there are definitely different schemes to support foreign companies to set up in Hong Kong. If for those who's interested, feel free to reach out to us afterwards. I think I also want to add that I forgot, was it 2 or 3 years ago, the Hong Kong government set up the what they call OASIS, which stands for the Office for Attracting Strategic Enterprises. So we've always had an organization called Invest Hong Kong that is, of course, to encourage foreign investment into Hong Kong. OASIS is not replacing Invest Hong Kong, but it's in addition to Invest Hong Kong, and it focuses on several industry. And healthcare, biotech is one of the strategic industries that Oasis has identified. So they are very happy to help, foreign companies who want to set up in Hong Kong. So for those interested, you can reach them directly or come to us for referrals.
Thank you, Christopher. Okay, so the other question that we have is, considering the growing demand for cell and gene therapies, do you see opportunities for specialized European CDMOs, contract development and manufacturing organizations, to support Asian companies or clinical trials from a manufacturing standpoint?
Maybe I'll take that first. I think it really depends on the nature of the relationship or the nature of for example, the European CDMO, what type of services and support is offering the Asian companies. If we're talking about, because for Asian companies in particular, they would see that the biggest opportunities or the biggest growth markets would undoubtedly be in Asia, and particularly, of course, China, India, Southeast Asia, Indonesia, for example, has got a massive population as well. So if you're talking about moving the clinical trial or the research from Asia to Europe, I don't think that would be very well received. Because that's probably for them, they may see that as reducing the size of the potential market. So there's always opportunities, whether it's for CDMOs or even other types of contractors or consulting companies. But I think it needs the relationships they want to enter into with Asian companies or the type of service they offer to these companies need to be curated, because the focus of these companies is necessarily on Asia. I think this adds to an additional point, is that particularly for China, for Japan, and South Korea, and perhaps later on India. So we need to stop thinking of them as emerging economies or developing economies. They've long gone past that particular destination. So when we think of collaborating with them, we need to think of these economies or these companies as peers. So the relationship has to be less linear, in that sense, and we were more talking about collaboration. So, going back to the CDMO issue or the clinical trial issue, if we're talking about combining clinical trials in Asia and Europe, I think that's perhaps an easier sell or easier way to facilitate collaboration. But strictly to say to offer services for them to do their work in Europe, I don't think that would be that maybe that may not generate that much interest.
Thank you. Another question. How can the Hong Kong Council and practice support early stage biotech companies in scaling across the APAC region?
Sure. There's two ways. Firstly, as I mentioned, we have 50 offices around the world. A lot of them, of course, is across the APAC region. And each of these offices, I mentioned earlier, we will bring local players, investors, corporates, etc., to Hong Kong for our events. But we also organize events in different countries. So, if you are interested in a certain market, let us know, and I can introduce you to our team over there and see what they have in store this year or next year. Of course, the biggest sort of consolidation of players that we organize would be in Hong Kong. The other thing, of course, is that if you become a Hong Kong company, and I want to stress here that, and it echoes what Laurent mentioned earlier. For us, as long as you have a business registration in Hong Kong, we consider you a Hong Kong company. It doesn't matter whether you're headquartered in Hong Kong or not. It doesn't matter whether you're actually physically in Hong Kong or not. So if you become a Hong Kong company in that perspective, then there are a lot more sort of other programs that we offer. For example, we organize business delegations to different markets each year. We organize investment matching or business matching arrangements for Hong Kong companies, whether online or offline. So it just depends on what stage, as a company, what stage you're in. Are you looking for R&D collaboration? Are you looking for funding? Are you looking for strategic investment or customer acquisition? I'm sure there are ways we can help you scale. And yeah, we can be very flexible for that.
Thank you. We have no more questions for now.
Yeah, I have
I would like to add something on the last question and to complement on what Christopher said. It's HKTDC. He mentioned earlier some matchmaking, and just by experience, he mentioned the Asia Global Summit on Health, which is really the best one. And there's a matchmaking, platform, for example, which is online, but also there's in person part that, if I remember well. But it's a really great way to connect, because it's not just Hong Kong operator. It's like people, many people travels, from different countries, even from the rest of the world, and to look for partners, and and that's just let's say a very general event. I mean, general and specific to the industry, but open to anyone. If you want something maybe more tailor-made, and some you can just find HKTDC, but you mentioned also Hong Kong Invest. There's several organizations that can support, and so I think that Hong Kong has everything to in terms of services, and can really accommodate, because the spirit is really to make things happen, and that's very important, right? There's the barrier are almost non-existing or very low, and if there's any obstacle, usually the government is here to or public organization and organization, they are here for help you to overcome those problems. So it's really great. So that's something to mention.
Yeah, I have a question that I would like to put. That is, if there are specific subsectors within biotech or health tech that Hong Kong is especially focused in supporting the development.
Well, I think in general, things to do with pharmaceuticals, you know, or very high level medicine, cancer medicine, and also perhaps also from a diagnostic perspective, those technologies as well. I think it is also worth remembering, and this it echoes something I mentioned earlier about China, Japan, Korea being far more than developing economies. I think if you go to the very, very advanced medicine, those who perhaps in certain countries qualify as national strategic industries, this applies to Japan, to Korea, to China as well. If we go back a few years at the beginning of COVID, all these countries were trying to develop their own vaccines. I was actually in Korea at the time, and Korea delayed the vaccination progress because they were trying to develop their own one. In the end, they couldn't, and so they started bringing in Pfizer, Johnson and Johnson, etc. So if you are in a business that is really at the very top end of those technology, very top end of those medicine, then it may be a bit difficult because of course they would prefer their local ones. But if you're not out that very select group, and if you in pharmaceuticals, in drugs, etc. Also, I think the other thing worth mentioning is wellness. I'm not sure if anyone's here is in that particular space, but as the Asian population, whether it's China, India, Indonesia, etc., as they continue to come out of the recovery, the middle class continue, resume growth, wealth accumulates. There's a increasing demand in wellness, in life sciences. Maybe not so much, not just drugs, but also in like lifestyle related products and services. So that's also an area to look out for. And then I think finally, just to mention, mental health is not something that's traditionally been big in Asia. There's perhaps still a bit of stigma into it, but increasingly, in the crowded cities of Hong Kong, Tokyo, Seoul, Shanghai, I'm sure there's a bunch in India and then Southeast Asia as well. This is starting to become an issue. And also with, aging population, low birth rate, urban landscape, etc. This is will become a bigger issue, I think, in the not too distant future. So that's also a space worth looking into.
Okay, thank you. And another question that I have is for a company with limited resources, what would be the most effective first step for with the aim of entering the Hong Kong ecosystem?
I'll start first. I think Laurent can certainly supplement afterwards. I think the first thing is to actually go to Hong Kong and speak to some of the people. And that's why we organize the events that we mentioned, because those events would bring in people from across the healthcare ecosystem, whether they are from hospitals or pharmaceuticals, whether they're corporates already in healthcare or corporates looking to diversify into healthcare, whether they're investors or startups. I think the best thing is to talk to people. Once again, Hong Kong companies, they represent the single biggest source of FDI into every single province in China. So if scaling into China, for example, is something in your plans or something that you're interested in, the best way to do it is and if you have, as you mentioned, Juliana, if they have limited resources, the easiest way is first just to go to Hong Kong and talk to the ecosystem players there, talk to the companies, talk to the associations, talk to the hospitals there, see where the latest, areas and in fact where they project, say in the next 3 to 5 years, where the opportunities are, and see if you can meet someone who can help you. But yeah, Laurent, feel free to add on your experience as well.
Yeah, Christopher, I totally agree on what you said, because the first thing is to come to understand, how things works in Hong Kong, but in China or in this new market that's, meets potential, partners, but even just people to talk to, right? To get some first information before rushing and just jumping into like, okay, we set up a company and we try to apply for some program. That's for sure, because it's really related to not just what you're doing, but your strategy. Right, Hong Kong may or may not be. Sometime maybe you can go, to maybe mainland China, right? Even it's always great to have a vehicle, right, which is in Hong Kong, but in terms of operation, right? So it's really it's you have different option, but then financially, that's again depending on your situation, your needs, right? If you do something which is maybe not really cash intensive, you can start with simple program. But if you need more, something we forgot to mention is Incubio, which is a specific incubation program dedicated to biotech, startup, or like, and this the um, the amount. Let me share the link. It's is higher than normal incubation, and so this could be a really great way to start, right? That's I think because at the end in our industry or in deep tech, generally speaking, you need money to start, right? So I would say that you need to get some financial resources. And Hong Kong has plenty, but the best way to start is really to go to Science Park. In my opinion, I wouldn't find any other alternative. We mentioned the ESS, but that's a matching funding. So that means that, I mean, if you can get already if founders have already some capital, they can be matched, right? Or if they can get any loan or whatever investment, it can be matched. That's another option. But if you come with barely nothing, definitely is better to consider the Incubio program. Let me just check. I'm going to share but it's on the same page of the previous link I shared. I would like to share the specific link, but this is definitely the best, because also one things that I forgot to mention is about incubation and Incubio. Okay, this one is the government not just giving you money, right? It's also they give you premises. So when you are part of this program, you can get access to a lab, and it's in dedicated building, which have like fully equipped lab room. You can have also like common space with all the equipment. You can get access to all the equipment that you need, and that usually can cost hundreds of thousands, if not million. And that's also very, very important, because even if you have everything, if you have the money you still need to set up everything. Here you just come and it's plug and play. You can just come, with your team, with whatever, the minimum material you need, and then you can really start. You don't need to set up a lab from scratch. And that, I think, why it's definitely better to leverage, Science Park, because they offer you the whole infrastructure and not just the money. Because we have been talking mostly about the money, the access to the network, to event, and so on. But the infrastructure is very important. It's not. We are not in IT space where basically anyone could work from anywhere in the world with just a computer, right? And it's a bit more complicated. You really need to have a proper setup with equipment. And so that's why it's definitely the best option. Setting up a lab costs a lot, takes time. You need to also comply to some, you cannot rent any premises anywhere and set up, do some types of experiment, use some types of chemicals, because it's there's a regulation to follow. So I think that definitely considering this aspect in terms of infrastructure, it's definitely better to go to to Science Park, because that's probably the best venue to in terms of equipment. That's really and I found the link. I'll just share it now. So
thank you.
We have one more question when you're ready.
Sure. That's the one on regulatory, right?
Sorry?
That's the one about the regulatory framework and
Yeah, it is. It is.
Maybe, yeah, Christopher, you like to start, because it's I
it's a
could
very
just
broad
simply, yeah.
it's actually a very broad question, and I think in general, most countries would have their own healthcare regulation framework. Of course, some of the regulations would be the same. There would also be ones that are necessarily different. I don't think any country or any jurisdiction in the world voluntarily enters in, complies with another country's healthcare regulation. I think healthcare finance, these are things that pretty much every country would, or every jurisdiction would have their own regulations. So when you talk about like say Asia, like common challenges when entering the Asia Pacific region. And the Asia Pacific region is such a massive region. It's very difficult answer or question to answer. I think what is worth remembering is that, and particularly, I think it also goes into also a business mindset is that have to be flexible because every single jurisdiction you enter, whether it's in Asia or Middle East or even North America, they would have their own sets of regulations or cultural specificity or preferences, and you must abide by them. Even whether it's in healthcare or another industry, if you want to do business internationally, you must be prepared to deal with regulations that are, perhaps a bit different to what you're used to. And I think one, if I use Hong Kong example, th- there are, motivations for, collaborations, motivation to bring things that are closer together, maybe not in terms of, bringing the regulation to the same framework, but for example, the fact that, clinical trials in Hong Kong can be recognized by the EU, that is one example of the two regions or the two economies working together. But once again, regulation is, something that I'm sure each government would hold very close to their heart. So it's very difficult to address that question as a whole.
Yeah, I would like just, to give a maybe more like a shorter, answer. But again, it's really depending. It's a very case by case situation. But I would say that, let's say, talking to about our situation, dealing with diagnostic, there's the first things you have two types of market, which is regulated and unregulated. Either you work only on the detection for the research, which is called are your research use only, or you work on the IVD. IVD is regulated and means that you need to have, whatever, CE, FDA, NMPA, that's for China and all. And this again will depend on your target market, right? So that means you want to Korea is the KFDS, Korean FDA, you go to China NMPA. And so each of them, they have a specific, so it really depends on your final market. And for that, you don't have any choice but just to follow the rules and comply, with whatever, is required, which means like, usually it's time, you need space specialist in the team that knows about how to answer or to process everything. You need also the budget for, it can cost even millions just for initial application, millions of US dollar, and then you basically have to renew. So, and that's so it's really yeah, but you have to so make sure you target the right market, right? Because once you enter into this kind of um, process, it's very time consuming but money consuming, and and it's better to be ready for that. So that's something to usually not to do before. I would say having substantial financial resources or before like raising substantial amount of fund, right? Because it's a budget. Yeah.
I think we have no more questions. So I would like to once again thank our speakers and for your insights and for sharing your expertise and experience with us. And to all the participants, thank you for joining us. We hope you found the session informative and helpful. And I don't know if our speakers has anything that would like to have before we finish the session?
Well, I guess I'll just say one final thing is that, you know, anyone can see, the HKTDC, you can look at us as your first point of contact for Hong Kong, whether you want to be about whether you have questions about Hong Kong specifically or how you can make use of Hong Kong to access other markets in Asia, China, Southeast Asia, for example. So please reach out to myself or my colleague Judith, who just showed her screen, her face now. And yeah, anytime you have any questions, again, we're a non-profit, so we're not going to charge you any fees to answer your questions.
Thank you. So, and before we wrap up, just one quick note. As I said at the beginning, if you are an SME, we encourage you to explore the services available through the DGLPT, our Digital Innovation Hub in Portugal for health. And you can find more information on our website. This was the last webinar of this spring series. So I will invite you to stay tuned for news on the webinars of the autumn series. Hope to see you all there and have a wonderful weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.